My mother just threw me out onto the street because I refused to sell my $14,000 wardrobe to pay for my sister's medical bills. I am shaking uncontrollably right now, trying to understand how my own flesh and blood could look at me with such pure hatred just because I said no. I truly believed I was the monster here. I thought I was the selfish, a vain sister who cared more about Chanel bags than saving Elena's life. But tell me something. If your sister was truly dying and drowning in debt, would she be hiding a $60,000 collection of limited edition figures in her bedroom while you starved yourself to pay her hospital fees? While I was draining my emergency savings to save her, my parents were secretly helping her forge my signature to buy a sports car for her 24-year-old boyfriend. They watched me cry myself to sleep with guilt. They watched me hate myself. And the whole time, they were protecting a liar who was sitting on a gold mine. I just uncovered the most twisted financial betrayal imaginable, and I decided to burn it all down. Now, my childhood home is gone. Their secrets are exposed to the loan sharks. And I am sitting here in an empty apartment, wondering if justice is worth this terrible silence. When does a safety net become a noose? Guys, please tell me, Xiao Yu Jing Ha Ling, 2# is greater than did I go too far? My name is Nova Vance. I am 32 years old, and I work as a creative director for a high-end branding agency in the heart of Manhattan. I live alone in a minimalist, glass-walled apartment in Tribeca, New York City, far removed from the suffocating suburbs of New Jersey where I grew up. To the outside world, I am the picture of modern success, independent, wealthy, and impeccably dressed. But if you stripped away the 6-figure salary and the designer labels that I use as armor against the world, you would find a woman who is profoundly exhausted. My family consists of my parents, who believe they are martyrs, and my older sister, Elena, who believes the world owes her a living. At this very moment, I am standing in a place I swore I would never return to, watching the slow-motion train wreck of my life begin. It started on a Tuesday evening, the kind of humid, overcast night that makes the city air feel heavy. I was in my walk-in closet, a space that is larger than the bedroom I slept in as a child. This room is my sanctuary. It is temperature-controlled and silent, filled with the scent of cedar and expensive leather. I was running my fingers over the texture of a vintage Chanel tweed jacket, checking for any imperfections. I treat my wardrobe better than I treat most people. These clothes do not judge me. They do not ask for loans they will never repay. They simply exist to make me look invincible. I had just poured myself a glass of Cabernet when my phone buzzed against the marble countertop of the kitchen island. The screen lit up with the one word that always makes my stomach tighten. Mom. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I took a sip of wine, bracing myself for a complaint about her neighbors or a guilt trip about why I had not visited for Christmas. Nova, you have to come home. My mother's voice shrieked, cracking with a hysteria that felt both terrifying and strangely rehearsed. It is Elena. It is her kidneys. Oh God. Nova. She is dying. The glass of wine lingered near my lips. I did not drop it. I did not scream. I just felt a cold, familiar numbness wash over me. Which hospital? I asked, my voice steady, professional, the same tone I use when a client hates a pitch. Mount Sinai, the one near the house. She sobbed. Just get here. Bring your checkbook. Just bring yourself. Please, that slip of the tongue. Bring your checkbook was the first red flag, though I chose to ignore it in the heat of the moment. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and took one last look at my pristine apartment. It was safe here. It was quiet. Leaving it felt like stepping off a cliff. The drive from the city to the suburbs took 90 minutes. As the glittering skyline of New York faded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the dull, repetitive strip malls and aging colonial houses of New Jersey, I felt my posture change. My shoulders hunched. The confident creative director was fading, replaced by the little girl who was never quite good enough, never quite as fragile or needy as Elena. When I walked into the hospital room, the smell of antiseptic and stale coffee hit me instantly. My parents were huddled by the bed, looking smaller and older than I remembered. My father was wringing his hands, a habit he did when he was worried about money. My mother was stroking Elena's hair, murmuring soft things she never said to me. And there was Elena. My sister is 36, 4 years my senior, but she has always played the role of the helpless child. She lay in the hospital bed, pale and hooked up to an intravenous drip. She looked genuinely sick, her face puffy, her skin sallow. But as I stepped closer, clutching my Hermes Birkin bag a little tighter, her eyes snapped open. They did not look at my face. They darted instantly to the bag in my hand, then to the Cartier watch on my wrist, before finally drifting up to meet my eyes. "Nova," she wheezed, her voice weak and scratchy. "You came." I stood at the foot of the bed, keeping a safe distance. "I am sorry you are sick." "Elena, what happened?" "Mom said it was your kidneys." My mother jumped in before Elena could answer. "It is acute failure. The doctors say it is genetic. Just bad luck. Our poor, fragile Elena. She has been under so much stress lately." "Genetic?" I frowned. "No one in our family has kidney issues." The door opened, and a weary-looking doctor in blue scrubs stepped in, holding a clipboard. "The sister," he said, glancing at me. "We are stabilizing her. We need to discuss the toxins found in her blood work. The levels of diuretics and unregulated diet supplements are alarmingly high." My mother practically leaped from her chair, cutting him off with a loud, nervous laugh. "Doctor, we can discuss the technical details later. Right now, my daughter needs rest. It was just a reaction to some tea she drank." "Just tea?" I narrowed my eyes. The doctor looked annoyed but too tired to argue with a hovering mother. He checked the monitors, "Sihid," and walked out. "Toxins? Supplements?" I asked, looking at Elena. "I just wanted to look nice," Elena whispered, tears welling up in her eyes instantly. "Like you, Nova. I wanted to fit into my cosplay costumes for the convention next month. I do not have your money to hire personal trainers or eat organic food. I took some cheap pills. I did not know they would kill me." She began to sob, a wretched, heaving sound. My father glared at me as if I were the one who had force-fed her the pills. "Look what you did," he hissed at me. "You come in here with your fancy clothes and make her feel inferior. This is your fault." "Nova." I stood there, stunned. I had been in the room for less than 5 minutes. I had not bragged. I had not even taken off my coat. Yet, somehow, Elena's vanity and recklessness had already been twisted into my sin. I looked around the sterile room. On the bedside table, amidst the medical clutter, was a stack of unopened bills and a foreclosure notice peeking out from under a violently bright anime magazine. This was not just a medical emergency. This was a trap, and as I looked at Elena's tear-stained face, I realized she was not just crying from pain. She was crying with the desperate, the hungry look of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. I took a deep breath, mentally calculating the balance of my emergency savings account, and prepared for the request I knew was coming. The piece of my life was officially over. The air in the hospital room had grown thick and stagnant, heavy with the scent of rubbing alcohol and the unspoken expectations of my family. Outside the window, the New Jersey night was pitch black, but inside, the fluorescent lights hummed with an aggressive brightness that made everyone look ghostly. I sat on a hard plastic chair in the corner, clutching my purse on my lap like a shield. My mother was pacing back and forth at the foot of the bed, while my father stared blankly at the television mounted on the wall. Though the volume was muted, Elena shifted in the bed, groaning theatrically every time she moved an inch. She had a stack of papers in her hands, the edges crumpled from how tightly she was gripping them. They were medical bills. In America, seeing a stack of papers like that is terrifying enough to induce a heart attack on its own. And I knew exactly where this conversation was heading. These deductibles are insane, Elena whimpered, tossing one of the papers onto the tray table. The ambulance ride alone was $2,000. And since I have not been working because of my anxiety, I do not have the premium insurance. They are saying most of this is out of network. She looked at me then. It was a calculated look, peering through her eyelashes to see if I had reacted. I kept my face neutral, a skill I had perfected in boardrooms full of aggressive male executives. I am sorry, Elena, I said quietly. The system is broken. It is unfair. Unfair does not pay the bills. Nova, my mother snapped, stopping her pacing to glare at me. She treats the word money like it is a dirty secret, yet it is the only thing she ever really wants to talk about. Your sister is drowning here. She could lose everything. The collectors will come after her credit score. She will never be able to rent a decent apartment again. My father finally looked away from the silent television. We are retired. Nova, you know we live on a fixed income. Social Security barely covers the heating bill in the winter. We cannot help her, not like you can. The trap was springing shut. I could feel the metal teeth closing around my ankle. How much is it? I asked, keeping my voice level. $14,000. Elena said quickly. Too quickly. She had the number ready on the tip of her tongue. That is just for this week. The dialysis, the stay, the tests, and I need to pay it now to stop them from sending it to collections. $14,000. It was a significant amount of money. Even for me, I made a good living. But living in Manhattan is expensive. My rent, my student loans, and maintaining the image required for my job took a large chunk of my income. I did not just have $14,000 lying around in a checking account to throw into a black hole. I took a deep breath. I can help, I said, reaching for my purse. I have an emergency savings fund. It is for things like if I lose my job or have a health crisis of my own. I can write you a check for $7,000 right now. That should cover half and get the hospital off your back for a while. I waited for a thank you. I waited for a sigh of relief. I waited for my parents to tell me that I was a good daughter for sacrificing my safety net for my sister's mistakes. Instead, the room went dead silent. Elena stared at me, her mouth hanging open slightly. 7,000? That is it? Excuse me? I blinked, thinking I had misheard her. $7,000 is nothing. Nova? She cried out, her voice rising to that shrill pitch that used to make me hide in my room as a child. That barely covers the ambulance and the room fee. What about the rest? What am I supposed to do? Beg on the street? I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. I am giving you $7,000 of my hard-earned money. Elena, that is a lot of money. Most people would be grateful. You have a closet full of bags worth more than my life. Elena shouted, pointing a shaking finger at my Birkin. That bag alone is what? 12,000? 15,000? And you have those Chanel jackets. Those shoes you wear once and throw in a box. You are sitting on a gold mine, and you are tossing me crumbs. My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her grip was firm, bordering on painful. Nova, honey, listen to your sister. She is right. You have so many things you do not need. Material things. They are just leather and fabric. This is your sister's health. Why do you not sell a few things? Just a couple of bags and maybe that watch. You can always buy them again later when you get your bonus. I pulled away from her touch. Standing up, the suggestion was so casual, so entitled, that it made me dizzy. My wardrobe was not just stuff. It was my collection. It was my investment. I had spent a decade curating it, hunting for vintage pieces, restoring them, caring for them. It was the physical manifestation of my success, the proof that I had made it out of this depressing town. Asking me to liquidate my assets because Elena took too many diet pills felt like a violation. No, I said firmly. My voice shook slightly, but I held my ground. I am not selling my clothes. I am not selling my property. I offered you $7,000 cash. Take it or leave it. Elena threw her head back against the pillow and wailed. A loud, ugly sound of frustration. She cares more about her stupid fashion than she cares about me. She would rather hug a leather bag than save her own sister. Nova, how can you be so selfish? My father grumbled, shaking his head with deep disappointment. We raised you to care about family. When did you become so cold? I looked at them, my mother rubbing Elena's arm, my father glaring at me with disgust, and Elena watching me with wet, hateful eyes to see if I would break. They did not see a daughter or a sister. They saw a resource. They saw a bank account that had the audacity to say no. I pulled my checkbook out, wrote a check for $7,000, and ripped it out with a sharp tearing sound. I placed it on the bedside table next to the foreclosure notice. This is what I can give, I said, my voice icy. If it is not enough, maybe you should sell your anime figures. I hear some of those are worth money. Elena stopped crying instantly. She let out a short, mocking laugh. Those are just plastic toys. Nova, they are worth $50 at a garage sale. Do not be ridiculous. You are the rich one. You are just being stingy. I turned and walked out of the room before I screamed. I needed air. I needed to get away from the suffocating weight of their entitlement. But as I walked down the long, sterile hallway of the hospital, I could still hear my mother's voice behind the closed door, comforting Elena, telling her that they would find a way, that they would fix what I had broken. I felt sick, not because of the money, but because deep down, a small, treacherous part of me wondered if they were right. Was I selfish? Was I a bad person for loving my things? The gaslighting had already begun, and the first crack in my armor had appeared. The silence of my apartment in Tribeca usually brought me peace, but for the last 3 days, it had felt like the calm before a hurricane. My phone had become a radioactive object that I was terrified to touch. Every hour, it buzzed with a new barrage of text messages from my mother. They ranged from passive-aggressive links to articles about family duty to long, rambling paragraphs detailing Elena's suffering. She is in so much pain. Nova, the doctors say stress makes it worse. Knowing she has that debt hanging over her is literally killing her. Your father had to skip his blood pressure medication to save money for groceries. Just thought you should know. We raised you better than this. Money is the root of all evil, and it has corrupted you. I did not reply. I sat on my beige linen sofa, staring at the skyline, feeling the guilt gnaw at my stomach lining. It was a physical sensation, like swallowing broken glass. I had given them $7,000. To most families, that would be a life raft. To mine, it was an insult. By Friday afternoon, the silence from their end had become more unsettling than the noise. My intuition, honed by years of navigating high-stakes corporate politics, told me that something had shifted. They had stopped asking. That meant they had found another solution. Or worse, they were taking matters into their own hands. I drove back to New Jersey on Saturday morning. I told myself I was going to check on Elena to see if she was recovering after being discharged. But deep down, I was going to protect my territory. I still had a room in their house, my childhood bedroom, where I kept some off-season clothes and a few investment pieces I did not have space for in the city. It was supposed to be my safe harbor. When I pulled into the driveway, the house seemed quiet. My father's old sedan was there, but the blinds were drawn. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the hallway. The air smelled of chicken soup and something sickly sweet, like cheap air freshener trying to mask the scent of illness. "Hello?" I called out. "Sao yu jing hao." Lean. 2 hash is greater than no answer. I walked up the stairs, the wood creaking under my boots. I passed Elena's room. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear the faint, tinny sound of a cartoon playing on a television. I decided to go to my room first, just to drop off my bag and wash my face. I reached the end of the hall and stopped dead. The door to my bedroom was white, with a simple brass knob. I always locked it when I left. I had installed the deadbolt myself 5 years ago, after Elena had borrowed a silk scarf and ruined it with ketchup stains. Now, the wood around the door frame was splintered, my heart hammered against my ribs. It looked like someone had taken a screwdriver or a crowbar to the jamb. The metal strike plate was hanging loose by a single screw. The door was pushed open. I stepped inside, and a sound of pure distress escaped my throat. My sanctuary had been violated. The closet doors were thrown wide open. My clothes, usually color-coordinated and hung with precision, were shoved aside or lying in heaps on the floor. Shoeboxes were pulled out, their lids scattered like debris after a storm. I rushed to the top shelf. That was where I kept it. My holy grail, a vintage Chanel classic flap bag in black quilted lambskin with 24-karat gold hardware. I had bought it at an auction in Paris 3 years ago. It was an investment piece, appreciating in value every year. It was worth at least $10,000 in today's market. The dust bag was there, crumpled on the floor. The bag was gone. My blood ran cold, then immediately boiled hot. This was not a burglary. A burglar would have taken the jewelry on the dresser or the laptop I sometimes left behind. This was targeted. I spun around and marched down the hall. I did not knock on Elena's door. I shoved it open with enough force that it banged against the wall. Elena was sitting up in bed, surrounded by a fortress of pillows. She was wearing a faded pink hoodie and eating chips from a large bag. Her laptop was open on her lap, playing some bright, loud anime show. She looked up, startled, a chip halfway to her mouth. "Nova?" What is your problem? Where is it? I demanded, my voice shaking with a rage I had not felt since I was a teenager. Where is what? She chewed the chip slowly, feigning ignorance. Her eyes, however, betrayed her. They flickered toward the corner of the room. I followed her gaze. There, shoved carelessly between a pile of dirty laundry and a stack of manga comic books, was my Chanel bag. It was not in its protective dust bag. It was lying on the floor, seemingly crushed under the weight of a heavy pile of fashion magazines. I lunged forward and grabbed it. I inspected the leather frantically. There was a faint scratch near the clasp. My stomach dropped. You broke into my room, I whispered, clutching the bag to my chest. You pried the lock off the door and you stole from me. Elena rolled her eyes and licked the salt off her fingers. Oh, stop being so dramatic. I did not steal it. I was just borrowing it. Borrowing it? I screamed. You do not borrow a $10,000 bag to keep it on a pile of dirty laundry. And you definitely do not break a lock to borrow something. Mom and Dad said it was okay, Elena shouted back, her voice taking on that whining, a victimized tone. We needed money. Nova. I was going to list it on eBay. I figured, since you were being such a miser with your cash, you would not mind if I sold one of your dusty old bags to save my life. I stood there, gasping for air. The audacity was suffocating. You were going to sell my property without my permission? That is a felony. Elena, that is grand larceny. Just then, my parents appeared in the doorway. My mother looked flushed, wiping her hands on an apron. My father stood behind her, looking grim. What is all this shouting? My mother asked, looking from me to Elena. She broke into my room, I yelled, holding up the bag. She tried to steal this. Nova, lower your voice, my father commanded. He stepped into the room, his presence filling the small, cluttered space. We had to get the key. You changed the lock, so I had to pop it open. We needed to see if there was anything valuable we could use. You helped her? I looked at my father, horror washing over me. You helped her break into my room? We are a family, my mother cried out, tears instantly springing to her eyes. We share burdens? Your sister is drowning in debt, and you are hoarding treasures like a dragon in a cave. It is sick, Nova. It is sick that you care more about that leather pouch than the fact that your sister might lose a kidney. I looked down at the floor, trying to steady myself. That was when I saw it, next to the spot where my bag had been lying. Half hidden under a fast food wrapper was a crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt. I bent down and snatched it up before anyone could stop me. Hey, give that back, Elena shrieked, scrambling forward in the bed. But she was too slow. I smoothed out the paper. It was a transfer receipt from a check cashing place down the street. It was dated 3 days ago. The day I gave them the $7,000, the receipt showed a transfer of $5,000, but it was not to the hospital. It was not to a pharmacy. It was sent to a recipient named Mark Sullivan. I stared at the name. Mark. Who was Mark? And why was my dying sister sending him $5,000 of my emergency savings while claiming she could not pay her ambulance bill? I looked up at Elena. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with genuine panic for the first time. Who is Mark? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. Elena stammered. He, Soyuting Haoling, Doi. He is a specialist. A holistic doctor. The insurance does not cover him. A holistic doctor that you pay via a wire transfer at a check cashing store? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Give me that. Elena lunged at me, trying to grab the receipt. But I stepped back. My mother stepped between us. Nova, stop interrogating her. She is sick. If she says it is for a doctor, it is for a doctor. Why are you so suspicious? Why do you hate your sister so much? I looked at the three of them. My parents, blind with denial, and my sister, a master manipulator who was bleeding us all dry. The image of the perfect, struggling family had shattered completely. This was not about medical bills. There was something rodder, something darker happening here. I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. I gripped my bag in my other hand. I am leaving, I said coldly, and I am taking everything of value out of my room today. If you touch my lock again, I will call the police, and I do not care if we share the same DNA. You would not dare. My father growled. Try me, I said. I turned and walked out, but my mind was racing. $5,000 to a man named Mark, and all around Elena's room, amidst the squalor, the glass cabinet of anime figures gleamed under the light. I paused for a split second, looking at those figures. Plastic toys, she had said, worth $50. I pulled my phone out as I walked down the stairs and snapped a quick, high-resolution photo of the glass cabinet through the open door before anyone could stop me. I was done being the victim. It was time to find out what exactly my $7,000 had really paid for. The sting on my cheek was not sharp at first. It was a dull, heavy throb that radiated from my jaw to my ear, accompanied by a ringing silence that seemed to suck all the air out of the hallway. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, my hand instinctively flying to my face. My father stood before me, his chest heaving, his hand still suspended in the air as if he were waiting for applause. He had never hit me before, not once. He was a man of quiet disappointment, not physical violence, but the sight of me clutching my own property, refusing to yield to the parasitic demands of the family, had broken something inside him. You are a cold-hearted monster, he spat, his voice trembling with a rage that felt disproportionate to the situation. Your sister is lying there sick, and you are worried about a bag. Get out. Get out of my house before I throw you out. My mother did not scream. She did not rush to comfort me. She stood in the doorway of Elena's room, her arms crossed over her chest, watching me with a look of grim satisfaction. It was as if she believed I finally deserved this punishment for the crime of being successful. I did not say a word. I could not. My throat felt like it had been filled with cement. I turned around, gripping the handle of my Chanel bag so tightly that my knuckles turned white, and I walked down the stairs. My legs felt numb, like I was wading through deep water. I grabbed my coat from the rack near the door. As I reached for the handle, my father shouted from the top of the landing, "Do not bother coming back, Nova. Not until you learn what it means to be a family. We do not want your charity if it comes with judgment. We will figure this out without you." I opened the door and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The sky was a brilliant, indifferent blue. A neighbor was walking her dog across the street, and she paused to look at me, but I kept my head down. I marched to my car, a sleek silver sedan that looked like a spaceship parked in front of the peeling paint of my childhood home. I threw my bag onto the passenger seat and climbed in. As soon as the heavy door sealed shut, locking out the world, I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely put the key in the ignition. I did not drive far. I pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed-down pharmacy 3 blocks away. I turned off the engine and just sat there. The silence of the car was suffocating. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. There was a faint red mark blooming on my left cheek. I touched it, flinching. This was my reality now. The people who were supposed to protect me had become my assailants. My phone began to buzz incessantly on the center console. It was a group chat titled Family. Mom, you have broken your father's heart. Mom, Elena is having a panic attack because of you. Elena, I hope you are happy. You value leather over blood. I stared at the messages, feeling a wave of nausea. They were rewriting history in real time, painting me as the villain to justify their own greed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone through the windshield. But then, a colder, sharper feeling took over. It was the icy clarity of someone who realizes they have nothing left to lose. I picked up the phone and blocked the group chat. Then I blocked my mother, then my father, then Elena. The silence that followed was absolute. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled receipt I had snatched from Elena's room. The name Mark Sullivan stared back at me in faded black ink. $5,000. A holistic doctor, she had said. I opened the browser on my phone. I did not search for doctors. Instead, I logged into a background check service that my branding agency used to vet potential employees. It was expensive, but it was thorough. I typed in the name Mark Sullivan and the location of the check cashing store listed on the receipt. While the search bar loaded, spinning in a mocking circle, I pulled up the photo I had taken of Elena's glass cabinet. The lighting was poor, but the figures were clear enough. To the untrained eye, they were just colorful dolls with big eyes and impossible hairstyles. But I worked in an industry that obsessed over details and valuation. I knew that in the world of collectibles, rare meant expensive. I opened my contacts and found Julian. Julian was an old college friend who now ran a high-end auction house for pop culture memorabilia in Brooklyn. He was the kind of guy who could tell you the value of a vintage comic book just by smelling the paper. I sent him the photo with a simple text. Need a favor? Can you give me a rough estimate on these? My sister says they are junk. The background check on my phone pinged. A profile for Mark Sullivan appeared. I clicked on it, my heart pounding against my ribs. Mark Sullivan, 24 years old, unemployed, no medical license, no business registration. His social media profiles were public. I clicked on his Instagram. It was a shrine to bad decisions. Photos of him holding stacks of cash, fans spread like a deck of cards. Photos of him at casinos in Atlantic City. Photos of him sitting in a new sports car. And then, I saw it, a photo posted 3 days ago. Mark was sitting at a bar, holding a cocktail. His arm was draped around a woman whose face was turned away from the camera. But I recognized the faded pink hoodie she was wearing. It was Elena. The caption read, "Sugar Mama came through. New wheels coming soon." I felt the bile rise in my throat. My sister was not dying of kidney failure caused by stress. She was not paying for a holistic doctor. She was funding the lifestyle of a boy toy who was 12 years younger than her, using the money I had given her to save her life. My phone buzzed again. It was Julian. "Nova? Are you serious? Where is this?" I typed back. "My sister's room." "Why?" 3 dots appeared, dancing on the screen for what felt like an eternity. "Please tell me she has insurance on these." Julian wrote, "That figure in the center? The one with the silver wings? That is a prototype. Only 50 were made. Last one sold at auction in Tokyo for $8,000. The whole cabinet? You are looking at $50,000 or $60,000. Easy. Maybe more if she has the original boxes." I dropped the phone into my lap. $60,000. My sister was sitting on a fortune of plastic while begging me to sell my clothes. She was driving me into debt, destroying my relationship with our parents, and guilt tripping me into an early grave, all while hoarding a collection worth more than a luxury car. And my parents? They had slapped me. They had called me a monster. They had kicked me out to protect a liar and a thief. I looked out the window at the desolate parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows across the asphalt. The sadness I had felt earlier began to evaporate, burned away by a white-hot fury. They wanted a villain, a fine. I would be the villain. I put the car in gear. I was not going back to the city yet. I had work to do. I sat in my car in the darkening parking lot, the glow of my phone screen illuminating my face like a ghostly mask. The revelation from Julian hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. $60,000. My sister, the invalid, the victim, the eternal martyr, was sitting on a literal gold mine of limited edition plastic while she demanded I liquidate my life to fund her bad decisions. And Mark, the boy toy with the gambling habit, the pieces of the puzzle clicked together with a sickening precision. But the final blow was yet to come. I needed to be sure. I needed something concrete that linked my parents to this madness. Something that proved they were not just blind enablers, but active participants in my financial execution. I remembered a conversation I had overheard years ago between my father and his lawyer friend at a barbecue. They had talked about public property records, about how easy it was to look up deed transfers online. My fingers flew across the screen. I navigated to the county clerk's website for the town where my parents lived. It was a clunky, outdated government site, but the search function worked. I typed in my parents' address. The results loaded slowly, line by line. Owner, Vance, Robert and Martha, deed, date, 1985. I scrolled down to the recent history. My breath hitched. Transaction date, 3 months ago. Type, quitclaim deed. Grantor, Vance. Robert and Martha, grantee, Vance. Elena, consideration, $1. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. They had transferred the house, my childhood home, the only significant asset my parents owned. They had given it to Elena for $1, 3 months ago, long before she got sick, long before she needed money. Why? To hide it? To protect it from creditors? Or simply because they had already decided that Elena, the helpless one, deserved everything, and I, the successful one, deserved nothing? It meant that when they died, I would inherit nothing. No share of the house, no sentimental value, nothing. They had effectively disinherited me while they were still alive. And now, they were trying to bleed me dry of my own earnings on top of it. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not pain. It was the snapping of a tether, the invisible cord that had bound me to them, the duty, the guilt, the desperate need for their approval. Finally broke. I started the car. The engine roared to life, sounding aggressive in the quiet night. I was not going back to New York. Not yet. I had one more stop to make. I drove to the address listed on Mark Sullivan's background check. It was a garden apartment complex about 20 minutes away, the kind with thin walls and overflowing dumpsters. I did not get out. I just parked across the street and waited. An hour passed. Then two. Just as I was about to give up, a car pulled up. It was a flashy, red convertible, older but freshly waxed. The driver's door opened, and a young man stepped out. He matched the photos exactly. Mark, he was wearing a tight t-shirt and ripped jeans. Looking every bit the aspiring influencer who lived off other people's money. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Elena stepped out. She was not in a wheelchair. She was not leaning on him for support. She was wearing high heels. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on his bicep. She looked vibrant, healthy. In her other hand, she held a large, rectangular box wrapped in plastic. Even from this distance, I recognized the logo on the side. It was a high-end anime figure, the kind that cost $5,000. The kind Julian had mentioned was releasing this week. I watched them walk toward the apartment building. Elena stopped at the door, kissed Mark on the cheek, and handed him the box like it was a trophy. My sister was not dying. She was not broke. She was playing the long con, and my parents were her willing accomplices. I drove away before they could see me. My hands were steady on the wheel now. The tears were gone. The hurt was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I was no longer Nova the daughter. I was Nova the creative director, and I was looking at a rebranding campaign. The client? My family. The objective? Total destruction. I pulled over at a gas station and grabbed a coffee. I took a sip, the bitter liquid grounding me. I unlocked my phone and opened my email. I drafted a message to my lawyer in the city. Subject: urgent. Need to discuss fraud and asset recovery. Then, I opened a new browser tab. I searched for anonymous tips for welfare fraud and reporting loan shark activity in New Jersey. I was done being the bank. I was done being the punching bag. If they wanted a war over money, I would show them what professional financial ruin looked like. I looked at the reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. The red mark on my cheek from my father's slap had started to bruise. It looked like war paint. Let the games begin. Monday morning in Manhattan usually felt like a fresh start. The city reset itself over the weekend, washing away the grime of the previous week with expensive brunches and gallery openings, ready to charge forward into another 5 days of ambition. For me, however, Monday arrived like a hangover that no amount of espresso could cure. I stood in the conference room of my agency, staring at a mood board for a luxury skincare line. The room was encased in glass, offering a panoramic view of the Hudson River. My team sat around the long oak table, waiting for me to speak. They were bright young designers with eager eyes and notebooks ready to capture my wisdom. Nova, my assistant, Chloe, asked tentatively, "Are we going with the serif font or the sans serif for the header?" I blinked, trying to bring the room into focus. The font, right. It was a simple question, but in my mind, I was seeing the image of my sister stepping out of that red convertible, healthy and laughing, clutching a box of expensive plastic toys. I was feeling the ghost of my father's hand on my cheek. "Serif," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "It implies heritage. Trust. Trust." The word tasted like ash in my mouth. My phone, which I had placed face down on the table, began to vibrate. It was a deep, angry buzz that rattled against the wood. I ignored it. I had blocked my family. I had built a digital wall to keep their madness at bay. It stopped. Then, 3 seconds later, it started again. "I am sorry," I murmured, reaching for the device. "I need to take this. It might be the vendor." I stepped out of the conference room and walked briskly down the hallway to a quiet alcove near the elevators. I looked at the screen. It was not a blocked number. It was an unknown number with a local area code. "This is Nova Vance." I answered, putting on my professional armor. "Is this the emergency contact for Elena Vance?" A male voice barked. It was not a polite voice. It was rough, impatient, and sounded like gravel grinding together. "Who is this?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "This is Russo from Ace Cash Express. Your sister put you down as her guarantor for a short-term loan. She is 3 weeks past due. She is not answering her phone. We know she is out of the hospital. Lady, we have eyes. If she does not pay the $3,000 plus interest by noon, we are sending someone to collect. And since you are the guarantor, maybe we send them to you." The hallway seemed to tilt sideways. Guarantor? I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to be responsible for Elena's gambling debts or her lifestyle. I did not sign any loan documents. I said, my voice rising in panic, "This is fraud. She used my name without my permission. Listen, lady, I do not care about your family drama." The man spat. "Your name is on the paper. Your social security number is on the paper. You pay, or we escalate. We know where you work. Nice agency. Be a shame if we had to come make a scene in the lobby." He hung up. I stood there, staring at the blank screen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My social security number. How did she get it? I thought back to the paperwork I had left in my old bedroom, the tax returns filed in dusty boxes in the attic. She had raided everything. She had not just stolen a bag. She had stolen my identity. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to lean against the wall to keep from sliding to the floor. This was not just a family dispute anymore. This was criminal. This was dangerous. These were not banks. These were predatory lenders who operated in the gray areas of the law. The kind who broke kneecaps and smashed windows. I went back into the conference room. My face must have been pale because Chloe stood up immediately. "Nova, are you okay? You look like you have seen a ghost. I need to leave." I whispered, "Family emergency." I grabbed my bag and ran. I fled the building that had been my kingdom, feeling like a fugitive. When I got back to my apartment in Tribeca, I thought I would find sanctuary. Instead, I found another blow waiting for me. The doorman handed me a thick envelope with a grim expression, served by a courier an hour ago. "Miss Vance," he said. I took the envelope. It was heavy. The return address was a law firm I did not recognize. Something generic like Smith and Associates. I took the elevator up to the penthouse, my hands trembling so badly I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the door. I threw my coat on the floor and tore open the envelope. It was a legal demand letter. "Dear Miss Vance, we represent your parents, Robert and Martha Vance, and your sister, Elena Vance. It has come to our attention that you have engaged in a campaign of harassment and emotional abuse against a critically ill individual. Furthermore, your refusal to provide financial support, despite your substantial means, constitutes a breach of implied familial contract under the doctrines of filial responsibility. We are demanding a monthly stipend of $5,000 to cover medical expenses and housing costs for your sister. Failure to comply will result in a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and a public petition to the court for support." I read the letter twice. Then I read it a third time. They were suing me. My own parents were threatening to drag me into court, to air our dirty laundry in public, to brand me as the wealthy, heartless daughter who let her sick sister starve, all to squeeze money out of me. They knew a lawsuit would destroy my reputation. In my industry, image was everything. A scandal like this, a rich, creative director abandoning her dying sister, would make me radioactive to clients. They were weaponizing my success against me. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. I did not bother with a glass. I drank straight from the bottle. The rich, dark liquid did nothing to warm the cold void in my chest. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the skyscrapers. I felt small. I felt cornered. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, probably the loan shark, or maybe another lawyer, or maybe my mother, calling from a burner phone to scream at me. I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I was 32 years old, successful, independent, and I was being hunted by the people who were supposed to love me. I thought about the red mark on my cheek. I thought about the figure in the box. I thought about Mark. Driving the car Elena had likely bought him. They were not just parasites, they were predators, and they would not stop until they had consumed everything I had built. They wanted my money, my dignity, and my future. A sob escaped my throat, a ragged, ugly sound. I let myself cry for exactly 5 minutes. I cried for the little girl who tried so hard to be perfect so her parents would notice her. I cried for the sister I thought I had. I cried for the loss of the illusion that I had a home. Then I stopped. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I stood up. The tears had cleared my vision. The alcohol had dulled the panic just enough to let the rage take over. If they wanted a legal battle, I would give them one, but I would not play by their rules. They were betting on my shame. They were betting that I would pay them off to keep quiet, to protect my image. They were wrong. I walked into my walk-in closet. I looked at the rows of designer clothes, the shoes, the bags. They were beautiful, but they were just things. They were armor. Yes, but armor could be heavy. I needed weapons. I went to my desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I picked up a pen. Step 1, forensic audit. Step 2, identity theft report. Step 3, scorched earth. I looked at the demand letter lying on the table. Filial responsibility, emotional distress. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. A shark of a woman named Jessica who cost $800 an hour and was worth every penny. Jessica, I said when she answered, I need you to clear my schedule for tomorrow. We are going to war. What kind of war? Nova? She asked, hearing the steel in my voice. Civil, criminal, impersonal. I said, my family just threatened to sue me. I want to countersue. I want to file charges for identity theft, and I want to hire a private investigator to document welfare fraud. There was a pause on the other end. Then I heard the smile in Jessica's voice. Send me the documents. Nova, let us burn it down. I hung up the phone. Outside, the city lights flickered on, one by one, like millions of watching eyes. I was alone, but I was no longer afraid. The tragedy was over. The retribution was about to begin. The manila folder on the passenger seat of my car was only half an inch thick, yet it felt heavier than a loaded gun. Inside were 20 pages of high-resolution photographs, financial audits, background checks, and appraisals. It was a dossier of betrayal, meticulously compiled over 48 hours with the help of my lawyer and a private investigator who charged me $3,000 to tell me what I already felt in my gut. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home for what I knew, with a chilling certainty, would be the last time. The house looked deceptively normal. The lawn was freshly mowed, likely by my father, who complained about his bad back only when he needed me to hire a landscaper. The hydrangeas were blooming in blue and purple clusters along the porch. It was the picture of suburban mediocrity, a mask concealing the rot inside. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. My face was a mask of its own. I had applied my foundation with military precision to cover the dark circles under my eyes and the faint, yellowing bruise on my cheek where my father had struck me. I wore a sharp, charcoal gray blazer and black stilettos. I did not dress for a family dinner. I dressed for a deposition. I picked up the folder. My hands were steady. The trembling from 2 days ago was gone, replaced by a cold, calcified numbness. I walked up the path and unlocked the front door. I did not knock. I still had a key, and until they changed the locks, this was still technically my legal residence on my driver's license. The living room was dim. The curtains were drawn to block out the afternoon sun. My parents and Elena were sitting around the coffee table like a coven. The television was on, tuned to a daytime talk show where people screamed at each other about paternity tests. It felt fitting. They looked up as I entered. Elena was lounging on the sofa, her feet propped up on the table. She was eating a bowl of ice cream. She looked remarkably healthy for someone who, just days ago, was allegedly at death's door. Nova, my mother said, her voice dripping with a mixture of surprise and disdain. We thought you were busy ignoring our legal notices. I walked to the center of the room and turned off the television. The sudden silence was jarring. I am not here to fight, I said, my voice low and even. I am here to present facts. Before you drag me into court, and before I file my countersuit for identity theft and fraud, I want to give you one chance to see the reality of this situation. My father stood up, his face reddening. Identity theft? Are you crazy? We are your family. You cannot steal from family. You share with family. I ignored him. I placed the folder on the coffee table and flipped it open. The first photograph was the one I had taken of the glass cabinet in Elena's room. Beside it, I placed the professional appraisal report from Julian's auction house. This, I said, pointing to the photo, is not a collection of plastic toys. This is a curated investment portfolio of limited edition imports. Elena scoffed, digging her spoon into the ice cream. Oh, please, here she goes again. You are obsessed with my hobbies because you are jealous I have passion and you only have work. Read the appraisal. Elena, I said sharply. My mother picked up the paper, squinting at the fine print. What is this? $60,000? That is impossible. They are dolls. They are prototypes and first editions. I corrected her. The market value is $60,000. Minimum. That is 4 times the value of the wardrobe you asked me to sell. That is enough to pay off every single medical bill Elena has, with enough left over to put a down payment on a condo. I watched their faces. I expected shock. I expected my father to turn to Elena and ask if it was true. I expected my mother to gasp. Instead, my mother dropped the paper back onto the table and shrugged. So what? She said. I blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. So what? Mom, she is sitting on a fortune while begging me for money. She is letting you go into debt, letting you refinance the house, while she hoards $60,000 in her bedroom. It makes her happy. My mother said simply, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. She is sick. Nova, her life is hard. Those figures bring her joy. Why should she have to sell the only things that make her smile just to pay some greedy doctors? You have so much money. You can make more. Once she sells those, they are gone. I felt a vein throb in my temple. The logic was so twisted, it was almost impressive. It is not about joy, I said, flipping to the next page of the dossier. It is about fraud. I revealed the background check on Mark Sullivan. Then, the photos of Mark and Elena outside the apartment complex. The red convertible. The date stamps showing Elena walking in high heels, carrying heavy boxes, looking perfectly healthy. And this, I continued, my voice hardening, is where my emergency savings went. Mark Sullivan, a 24-year-old unemployed gambler. You told me the money was for a holistic doctor. Instead, it went to buy a car for Elena's boyfriend. Elena sat up straight, her eyes flashing with anger. He is not just a boyfriend. He is my support system. He understands me. He takes care of me when I am depressed. He is a leech. Elena, I shouted, finally losing a fraction of my composure. And you are feeding him with my money and Dad's retirement money? My father stepped forward, looming over me. Do not talk about your sister's personal life like that. You do not know what love is. Nova, you are cold. You live in that glass tower, alone. Elena has someone who loves her. If she needs to help him out a little to keep him around, that is her business. I stared at him. He was defending the man who was draining his bank account. He was defending the lie. She committed identity theft. Dad, I said, pulling out the final document, the loan documents from Ace Cash Express, the ones with my social security number forged on the bottom. A man called me at work yesterday, a loan shark. He threatened to come to my office. He threatened violence. My father waved his hand dismissively. He is bluffing. They always bluff. And if you had just paid the bill when we asked, he would not be calling you. You brought this on yourself by being stubborn. I felt the room spinning. I looked from my mother's defiant face to my father's angry glare, and finally to Elena's smug smirk. There was no reaching them. There was no logic that could penetrate the fortress of their delusion. In their minds, Elena was the eternal victim, the princess who deserved the world simply because she existed, and I was the villain, the servant who had gotten uppity and refused to pay the tribute. You are unbelievable. I whispered, you are actually condoning this. You are okay with her stealing from me. You are okay with her lying about dying. She feels like she is dying. My mother screamed, slamming her hand on the table. Her anxiety is real. Her depression is real. Just because you cannot see it on an X-ray does not mean it is not there. You are so judgmental. I took a deep breath. I closed the folder. I had my answer. The investigation was not for them. It was for me. It was to prove to myself that I was not crazy. Okay, I said quietly. I understand now. I turned to leave. I had nothing more to say. Wait, my father barked. We are not done. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. You are going to fix this. Nova, he said. His voice was dangerously calm. You are going to call that loan company and pay off the balance. Then, you are going to set up a direct deposit for your sister. $2,000 a month. That is fair. That is less than what you spend on shoes. And if I do not, I asked, not turning around, then you are dead to us. He said, and we will proceed with the lawsuit. We will tell everyone, your boss, your clients, the press, that you abandoned your dying sister. We will make you look like a monster, and we will sue you for parental support. In this state, The laws are tricky. Nova, we can tie you up in court for years. We will drain you on legal fees until you break. I turned around slowly to face them one last time. My father was standing with his arms crossed, looking triumphant, as if he had just played a winning card. My mother was nodding in agreement. Elena was licking the spoon of her ice cream, watching me with glittering eyes. They were holding me hostage. They were leveraging their own incompetence and malice to extort me. You want money? I asked. Yes, my mother said. We need the house paid off, and Elena needs security. I looked at the house around me. I looked at the peeling wallpaper in the hallway, the dusty chandelier, the accumulation of years of bad choices and resentment. I have a counteroffer, I said. They waited, expecting me to crumble, expecting me to negotiate a payment plan. I will not pay the loan, I said. I will not pay the monthly stipend, and I certainly will not sell my apartment. Then get out, my father shouted. Get out and never come back. I am going, I said. But before I go, I want you to know one thing. I know about the deed transfer. I know you gave the house to Elena for $1 to hide it from creditors. My father's face went pale. How did you? Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. R. Jing Hao Dayu. Public records. Dad, I said. But here is the thing about fraud. It only works if no one reports it. And here is the thing about loan sharks. They do not care about excuses. I opened the door, letting the bright, harsh sunlight flood into the dark living room. You have made your choice, I said. You chose the plastic dolls and the lies over your daughter. So, live with them. I walked out. Nova? My mother screamed after me, running to the doorway. You ungrateful brat. You will regret this. You will come crawling back when you are lonely and old. No one will love you like we do. I kept walking. I did not run. I walked with a steady, rhythmic click of my heels against the pavement. No one will love me like you do, I thought to myself as I reached my car. God? I hope not. I got into the car and locked the doors. I watched my mother standing on the porch, screaming silently behind the glass of my windshield. She looked small. She looked distorted. I picked up my phone. I had the number saved. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling 2. I dialed. This is Detective Miller. A voice answered. Detective, this is Nova Vance, I said, my voice crisp and professional. I would like to file a formal report for identity theft and forgery against Elena Vance. I have the documents ready. I also have information regarding a fraudulent transfer of assets to avoid debt collection that I believe is relevant to an ongoing investigation into illegal lending practices. I drove away as I spoke. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the family that had just tried to consume me whole. The confrontation was over. The war was just beginning. And for the first time in my life, I was not fighting to be good. I was fighting to be free. I drove 5 miles away from the house, pulling into the parking lot of a sprawling, 24-hour big box store. The fluorescent lights of the signage buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the asphalt. I did not go in to shop. I went in to disappear. Inside, the air conditioning was frigid. I walked past the aisles of bulk toilet paper and discount electronics until I found the prepaid mobile section. I selected a cheap plastic flip phone and a prepaid card with cash. The cashier, a bored teenager popping gum, did not look at me twice. To him, I was just another customer. To my family, I was about to become the architect of their demise. I returned to my car, the engine idling to keep the heat running against the chill of the evening. I unwrapped the plastic packaging of the phone, the crinkle sounding deafening in the silence. I inserted the battery and the SIM card. It booted up with a cheerful, pixelated chime that felt ironically bright given what I was about to do. I had saved the number of the man who called me, Russo, the loan shark. My hands hovered over the keypad. This was the point of no return. Filing a police report was one thing. That was the lawful, bureaucratic route. It would take months. It would involve lawyers and depositions. But contacting Russo? That was throwing a match into a powder keg. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was exactly what they deserved. I typed the number. I did not call. I sent a multimedia message. First, I attached the photo of Elena's glass cabinet, the one gleaming with her $60,000 collection. Second, I attached the screenshot of the professional appraisal from Julian, highlighting the lines that detailed the immense value of the prototypes. Third, I attached a screenshot of the deed transfer, showing Elena as the legal owner of the house. Then, I typed the text, "She is not broke. She is hiding assets. The collection in the bedroom is worth $60,000. The house is in her name. She is home now." I pressed send. The message swooshed away, a digital arrow flying into the dark. I powered down the phone, removed the battery, and snapped the SIM card in half. I rolled down the window and tossed the pieces into 3 different trash cans as I drove out of the lot. The execution was in motion. I drove back to the city, the skyline of Manhattan rising like a fortress of glass and steel in the distance. When I finally walked into my apartment, the silence was no longer heavy. It was expectant. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at my kitchen island. I opened my laptop. It was time for the second wave. My parents had threatened to ruin my reputation. I decided to check if they had started. I logged into Facebook, a platform I rarely used except to monitor brand sentiment for clients. There it was. My mother had posted a status update an hour ago. It was long, rambling, and laced with the kind of weaponized victimhood she had perfected over decades. "Please pray for our family. Our daughter Elena is fighting for her life, and today, her own sister came to our house and laughed in our faces. We have been abandoned by the one person who could help. It breaks a mother's heart to raise a child who cares more about designer purses than human life. We may lose the house, but we have our dignity." The post already had 40 likes and a dozen comments from neighbors and distant relatives. So selfish. I always knew she was stuck up. Stay strong. Martha, money changes people. Shame on her. I stared at the screen. The words should have hurt. They were designed to hurt. They were public shaming. A digital scarlet letter pinned to my chest. But as I read the comments, I felt nothing but a cold, distant pity. They were fighting a public relations war. I was fighting a tactical one. I opened the official website for the Social Security Administration. I navigated to the fraud reporting section. I filled out the form with clinical precision. Name of suspect, Elena Vance. Nature of fraud, concealment of assets. Undeclared income, fraudulent disability claim. I uploaded the photos of Elena in heels carrying the boxes. I uploaded the background check on Mark. I uploaded the proof of her buying expensive collectibles while claiming poverty. Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than submit. Next, I went to the state taxation website. I reported the deed transfer of the house as a fraudulent conveyance to avoid creditors. Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than submit. I closed the laptop. My phone, my real phone, buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. My stomach tightened. Had they reached out to my professional network? I clicked the notification. It was a message from a client, the marketing vice president of the skincare brand, Nova. I just got a very strange email from a woman claiming to be your mother. She is ranting about you abandoning your dying sister. It seems unhinged. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Hope everything is okay. They had actually done it. They had emailed my clients. They were trying to scorch the earth beneath my feet. I typed a reply, my fingers flying. I apologize for the disturbance. Sarah, my family is currently dealing with a severe mental health crisis and legal investigation involving my sister. Unfortunately, they are lashing out. My lawyer is handling the harassment. Please disregard. Saoui Jinghaling. De dièse est supérieur à 100. I stood up and walked to the window. Below me, the city moved in a river of yellow taxi cabs and red taillights. My parents thought they had played a trump card by going public. They thought the shame would break me. They did not understand that by trying to destroy my reputation, they had freed me from the last shackle of hesitation. I imagined Russo receiving that text message. I imagined the gears turning in his head. A loan shark does not care about sob stories on Facebook. He cares about his principal and his interest. He cares about collateral, and I had just pointed him directly to the vault. I looked at the clock. It was 9 in the evening. In the suburbs, the lights would be on in the living room. My parents would be reading the sympathetic comments on Facebook, feeling righteous, feeling vindicated. Elena would be in her room, admiring her collection, thinking she had won, thinking she was untouchable because she was sick. They had no idea that the wolves were not just at the door. I had just given the wolves the key. I took a sip of water. It was cool and clean. The fallout would be public. Yes, but not for me. The silence in my apartment over the next few days was absolute. I had changed my phone number. I had scrubbed my address from online directories. I had instructed the doorman to turn away any visitors who were not on a pre-approved list. I existed in a bubble of sleek, modern isolation. But in my mind, I was constantly replaying the scene that I knew must be unfolding in New Jersey. I did not need to be there to see it. The script had been written the moment I pressed send on that burner phone. It was Wednesday evening when the first confirmation arrived. It came not from my family, but from the police blotter of the local suburban newspaper, which I had been refreshing obsessively on my browser. Police report: disturbance at residence on Elm Street. Officers responded to a call regarding a break-in and vandalism. Residents claim forced entry by unknown assailants. Property damage reported. No injuries sustained. Investigation pending. Vandalism. Forced entry. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I could picture it. Russo's men were not subtle. They would not have knocked politely. They would have come for the collateral I promised them. I imagined Elena's room, the sanctuary she had built with lies. I imagined the sound of glass shattering as the cabinet was smashed open, the way her precious, limited edition figures, her investments, would have been swept into duffel bags like common trash. $60,000, gone in 60 seconds, and the house that was now legally hers, the house my parents had signed over to protect it, thinking they were clever. Now, it was on the radar of every creditor she owed. The next morning, I received an email from my lawyer. Jessica, subject, update on filings, Nova. Just heard back from the county clerk. A lien has been placed on the property at Elm Street by a collection agency. Also, The Social Security Administration has flagged your sister's file for immediate review based on the evidence provided. They will be freezing her benefits pending an audit. I read the words, waiting for the guilt to hit me, waiting for that familiar, sickening lurch in my stomach that told me I was a bad daughter, a bad sister. It did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow exhaustion. It was the feeling of walking away from a car crash unscathed but shaken. I went to my closet. I looked at the spot where the Chanel bag usually sat. It was still empty. I had never recovered it. In the chaos of the confrontation, I had left it there. It was a casualty of war, a $10,000 sacrifice to buy my freedom. I realized then that I did not care about the bag. I cared that they had felt entitled to take it. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank app. Check deposit reversed. $7,000. I frowned. I clicked on the details. The check I had written, the one Elena had used to pay Mark, had bounced? No, that was impossible. The funds were there. Then I saw the note from the bank. Stop payment issued by account holder. I froze it. I had not issued a stop payment. I had been too busy fighting. Then I remembered the day after I gave them the check. Before I knew about Mark, before I broke into the room, I had called the bank in a fit of anxiety to ask if the check had cleared yet. The teller had mentioned it was pending. I must have mumbled something about unauthorized use. Or perhaps the bank's fraud algorithm had flagged it because of the check cashing place's shady reputation. The money had never gone through. Mark never got paid. A chill ran down my spine. If Mark never got the money, 小金好零, 2# is greater than, and the loan sharks took the collection. 小金好零, R. 金好, 大鱼. Elena had lost everything. She had lost the cash. She had lost the figures. She had lost the house's security. And Mark, a guy like that does not stick around when the sugar mama's account runs dry. I sat on the floor of my closet, surrounded by my silent, loyal clothes. I had won. The victory was total. It was absolute, but it felt like ash. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window again. The city was beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, my mother was probably screaming into a phone that no longer rang. My father was probably pacing a floor that no longer belonged to him. Elena was probably looking at an empty shelf, finally understanding the true cost of plastic. I had protected myself. I had saved my future, but I had burned my past to the ground to do it. The scar on my cheek had faded to a faint yellow bruise, barely visible under concealer, but the other scars, the ones they could not see, would take much longer to heal. I took a sip of wine. It tasted sour. This was the aftermath. It was quiet, it was safe, and it was incredibly, profoundly lonely. 6 months had passed since I watched the digital bridge to my family burn. The seasons in New York had shifted from the humid oppression of summer to the crisp, biting wind of late autumn. I stood on the balcony of a new apartment in Brooklyn Heights. I had moved across the river, putting physical water between myself and the island where I had felt so cornered. My career was flourishing. The scandal my parents had threatened never materialized. It turned out that people care very little for the rantings of debtors when the person they are attacking is generating record profits. I was sipping an espresso, watching the ferry cut through the gray water, when my private email chimed. It was an address I rarely checked, reserved for old subscriptions and junk. The subject line was simple. Please. It was from an email address I did not recognize, but I knew the author immediately. 小鱼金好零 2# is greater than I opened it. Nova. We are staying at the Starlight Motel off the highway. We lost the house. The bank took it after the investigation. Elena is not doing well. She just sits in the chair and stares at the wall. Mark left her the day the money ran out. He took the car. We have no kitchen here, just a microwave. We are hungry. Please. We do not need thousands, just enough for a hot meal. We are your family. I stared at the screen. I pictured them, my mother, once the queen of her suburban castle, now heating up soup in a roadside motel room. My father, stripped of his pride, and Elena, the golden child, broken by the weight of her own greed and the sudden, brutal absence of her plastic empire. A part of me, the part that was still a daughter, felt a twinge of pity. It would be so easy to send them $500. It would be nothing to me. It would be a feast for them. But then I remembered the slap. I remembered the locksmith prying open my door. I remembered the text message from the loan shark threatening my safety. I remembered Elena laughing as she walked to the car with Mark, healthy and vibrant, while I lost sleep over how to save her life. They did not want a daughter. They wanted a savior. And if I saved them now, they would never learn. They would just wait for the next rescue. I opened my banking app. I navigated to the peer-to-peer transfer section. I typed in the email address associated with the message. I entered the amount, $50. In the memo line, I typed a single sentence. This is the value of a plastic toy. Just like Elena said, I pressed send. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel sad. I felt a strange, cold sense of balance. The scales had finally tipped. They had bet their future on a lie. And the house had won. I was the house. I blocked the email address. I set the phone down on the wrought iron table and pulled my cashmere coat tighter around my shoulders. The wind was cold, but the sun was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the skyline of the city that I had conquered. I was not a hero. I knew that. A hero would have forgiven them. A hero would have turned the other cheek. But I was not writing a fairy tale. I was surviving a thriller, and in the story of my life, I was finally the one holding the pen. I finished my espresso, turned my back on the view, and walked inside, closing the glass door firmly behind me. The silence was no longer lonely. It was peaceful.